We have 17 questions. Yeah, so we have this program, we're chanting japa online. In the afternoons, you don't get a lot of people. Between between Facebook, Russian Zoom, and Instagram, we get, I'd say, in the evening, you get, I would say, about 70 or 80 people, or something along those lines. I think it's unusual to get 100. But in the mornings, we get quite a few. This morning, I don't know how it happened, but we had on Facebook, between English, Bengali, and Hindi Facebook, we had almost 300 people. And between Russian Zoom, because on the Russians, the Russians are pretty serious. They just chant. Between Zoom and Instagram, we probably got about 60. So it's over 300, definitely over 300. Yeah. And that's not, there's another figure, not the likes. What is it? I forget what it is. But the highest figure, it's probably a few thousand. Okay, so devotees, let us begin trying to answer the questions. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadeshatarne Sri Krishna Caitanya Pramanityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All right, so first question. I was reading Caitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter not mentioned, but text 117. It's about regulative devotional service. It could easily be chapter 22, Sanatana Goswami, or it could be 19, Rupa Goswami. So it's about regulative devotional service, that one should avoid offenses against devotional service and the holy names. Can you please explain offenses against devotional service, please? Okay, so in Caitanya Charitamrita, these things are there, but they're also there, and it may just be a little more accessible and easy to read, possibly, if you look in Nectar of Devotion, because the same things are there, but there's a little more detail, and it's all sort of in one place, you could say. So offenses in devotional service. Of course, this is a very important subject, because if you commit offenses, obviously, you can't expect that things are going to go well. It It's obvious. So the offences against devotional service, they're described, and the offences against the holy names, in the 8th chapter of Nectar of Devotion in detail. So the offences against the holy names, those are the 10 offences, beginning with blaspheming the devotees who have dedicated their lives to propagating the holy names of the Lord, the glories of the holy names, who are preaching Krishna consciousness. And second offense is to consider the names of demigods, like Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the names of Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna. So we're not going to get into that now, but you're asking, what can we explain the offences against devotional service? Well, they're also there in that chapter 8 of Nectar of Devotion. The 10 offences which are more serious. I mean, any offence is serious. There's no offence which you can just sort of not worry about at all. But still the offences against the holy names, the 10 offences, are definitely very, very serious. The offences against devotional service, there's many of them. In that chapter 8, there are 2 lists of them. The first list is 32. Then the second list is 29. So that's 61 offences in devotional service. Technically speaking, they are usually called seva aparads. Seva, of course, meaning service or devotional service. So they're not, as we said, they're not as serious as the 10 offences. They can just be fatal spiritually if one commits them, particularly if one becomes sort of habituated to any of them. So the seva aparads are not as serious, but they're not to be taken lightly. So I'm not going to read all 61, but I will read a few of them just so you get the idea. The first one, and let me ask our devotees here because they're very knowledgeable. We have many Bhakti Shastris here. Plus I talked about this a few days ago anyway. What is the first seva aparad? I told you a few days ago. You got it. Well done. Okay. One should not enter the temple of the deity in a car or palanquin or with shoes on the feet. Anyone know the second one? That's more tricky. Okay. Well, we normally, if I ask any of you, what are the 10 offences? I'm sure you can all say all of them because we really, we recite them every morning at Mangalarti. So, and these we don't. So, okay, here's a few more. One should not fail to observe the various festivals for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, such as Janmashtami and Ratha Yatra. That's number 2. Number 3, one should not avoid bowing down before the deity. Nowadays we are not bowing down. Some bow down, but there's a fear or a danger or a fear, whatever you say, of some COVID being sort of hanging around on the floor. But, in my 49 years and 2 days of living in Prabhupada's temples, this is the first time since getting back from Joburg, first time not offering obeisances. And of course there very special and very unusual circumstances now, so that's another thing. But otherwise, normally, we should bow down nicely. Srila Prabhupada did not appreciate, for obvious reasons, devotees just running in, just choo, 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 Prabhupada, I was told when I joined that Srila Prabhupada had given a name to the type of obeisances where a devotee does that, just runs into the temple room, just down, up, and away. Prabhupada, I was told, called that jackknife obeisances. And I was told back at that time also that when devotees are sitting like in class, sitting on the floor, cross-legged, and like the deity curtains open at 8 o'clock, for example, and then devotees may then, while still sitting cross-legged, just kind of lean forward, and touch their head to the floor. Prabhupada, I was told, called that lazy man's obeisances. That's what they told me. Yeah. Actually, one should do it properly. So, right. One should not enter the temple to worship the Lord without having washed one's hands and feet after eating. One should not, number 5, one should not enter the temple in a contaminated state. And Prabhupada then goes into a bit of an explanation of when family members pass away for different types of, varanas. For Brahmins, they're considered contaminated for 12 days. Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, 15. Sudras, 30. They shouldn't enter the temple when a relative has passed away. Right. However, anyway, I don't think we really apply it. I don't. I tell the family members, come in and get some mercy. And number 6, now this is again a variation on number 3. Number 3 was to not avoid bowing down. And number 6 is, one should not bow down on one hand. In other words, 4 limbs should contact the ground. 2 legs and 2 arms at least. And Srila Prabhupada himself, even in his old age, up to late 70s and 80, he would always, as far as I know, as far as I saw, offer full dandavats flat on the floor. So one should not, in other words, we shouldn't offer just sort of any variation on express type of obeisances. Obeisances should be real, offering from the heart, respect. Number 7, one should not circumambulate in front of Sri Krishna. Hare Krishna. There was a discussion with Giriraj Maharaj, I'm sure you're aware of it, about this, or maybe he just himself brought it up many years ago when he was here, that Srila Prabhupada, I assume he was present. I don't know if he actually asked Prabhupada himself. Maybe he did, though. But he was there when Prabhupada was asked, why should we not circumambulate in front of Sri Krishna? Or maybe it's not even that one, but I think it was that one, which the idea being with the curtains closed. Right? You familiar with it? Yeah. And Maharaj told me that Srila Prabhupada said, because Krishna, if Krishna knows his devotee is there circumambulating and he cannot see his devotee, Krishna will feel frustrated. You heard that? That's what he told me, yeah. One should not spread his legs or her legs before the deity. One should not sit before the deity holding the ankles, elbows, or knees with one's hands. So that's about 10, well, that's 9 actually. But you get the idea. You get the idea. And the very last one, what's the very last one? Oh, well, here's a good one, 28, the second set. One should not decorate his forehead with the 3-lined tilak. We were reading the other day about the man who had 2-lined Vaishnav tilak and 3-lined impersonal Shivite tilak. And the very last one, one should not enter the temple without washing his hands and feet. So anyway, whoever it is who's asked this question, it's a good question, very good. But if you really want to get into the detail, you can read all those 61 offenses. They're like secondary offenses, you could say. Number 2, we've recently mentioned that austerities make our hearts harder. Does that mean that when I do dry ekadasi, it makes my heart harder? How can we avoid that? Yeah, well, you know, the first thing I'd say is Srila Prabhupada has given us our standard austerities, which are essentially to follow the regulative principles and chant 16 rounds a day, to which you could add bathing, I mean at least once a day, but maybe twice a day, depends on your situation, what service you're doing also. So these are standard austerities. Only eating prasadam, not eating anything which is not prasadam. Yeah, I mean, unless it's some extraordinary situation, which can happen sometimes when you're traveling, but you should take prasadam with you when you're traveling. But if somehow you haven't, then maybe you can offer some fruit or something like that. So, yeah, but otherwise, just sort of, what would you say, whimsical might be too sort of strong a term, but just your own invented austerities. Got to watch out for that. Got to watch out for that. Because when you start doing, the thing is with, like at the time of initiation, everyone vows, follow the 4 regulative principles, chant 16 rounds. It's not just follow the 4 regulative principles. It's a a restriction, an austerity. You cannot do certain things, which so many people do and even can't imagine not doing. So you must not do those things, but you must chant Hare Krishna. So if you're going to adopt other austerities, sort of, you could say of your own creation or just extra, then of course you should be very careful. It would quite likely be a good idea to take advice from a senior devotee. But if you're going to do something like that, I'm sure it's a very good idea to increase your Krishna conscious activity, particularly your hearing and chanting, to sort of offset the heart hardening effect of just being austere. Just being, because austere means negative. Not doing this, not doing that, generally. Yeah, austerity is negative, and that negativity, it has the hardening effect on the heart. So if you're going to do dry Ekadasi, that's there in Vaishnav culture actually, although Srila Prabhupada did not do it, and he certainly didn't regularly talk about it. He mentioned that there are occasions it's been mentioned, but he didn't make an issue of it. Yes. But Jiva Goswami talks about it, Lord Caitanya does, or in Caitanya Charitamrita there's talk of it. But you must increase your hearing and chanting. Actually, Ekadasi, if we just talk about Ekadasi is for increasing your hearing and chanting. There's a conversation between Srila Prabhupada and Tamal Krishna Goswami, in which Tamal Krishna Goswami asks Prabhupada, so must we chant 25 rounds on Ekadasi? And Prabhupada says, no, it's not that you must. But then Prabhupada says that you should really increase your hearing and chanting. That's what Ekadasi is for. Yeah, so if you're going to increase your austerity in some way which isn't like the typical way that devotees do things, you should increase your hearing and chanting. But if I was you must have been around Swarup Damodar Prabhu when, on Ekadasi, everyone stayed up all night and chanted, and then most of them slept for a little while, not for a long time. I mean, we slept okay, but that program didn't go on for a very long time. It went on for a while, though. Yeah. So generally, it's best to follow the standard program as far as austerities go, because Prabhupada's such an expert to balance these two things, austerity and devotion. Okay, so number 3, how can we develop a relationship with Srila Prabhupada? And the next one is, more or less, how can we develop love for Srila Prabhupada, approximately? So they're kind of the same question or closely related. The thing is, that to develop a relationship with Srila Prabhupada, develop appreciation and affection, love for him, there's a couple of considerations. One is through serving him. Srila Prabhupada explains how in in previous days in India, and it even, well, anyway, let's just say previous days in India, boys and girls would be married young. And young means, as an example, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when he was married, the first time, he was married twice, the first time, his wife was 5. And he was something like 9 or 10, something like that. Yeah. So then the practice was, I mean, obviously, they don't just become like regular husband and wife. But what happens is, well, because, they are usually from the same community. I mean, they'd always be from the same varna, either, Brahmins or Kshatriyas or whatever. And normally they would live close to each other. So the wife, this little girl, school age, little girl, her parents, in, consultation with the boy's parents, would get the little girl to cook for her husband. And, or maybe when 5 years old they wouldn't know how to cook, but to at least take prasadam to the husband and serve him prasadam with the understanding, this is my husband, which, in a certain sense would mean nothing to either of them. But through that service, regular service for some years until they're, mature enough, she was serving a husband. And in that way, the relationship developed and became deep and became very deep. And therefore, as Prabhupada pointed out, in those days, there were no divorce laws in India. I mean, after some time during the British period, divorce laws appeared. But going back further, there were no divorce laws generally because they were not required, because nobody wanted to get divorced. So like this, the point is, how do we develop a relationship with Prabhupada or develop love for him? A very important part is through service. Through service. Now, another thing which is very important, it's just very important indeed, is to study the biographies of Prabhupada. It's really important. Like, I've mentioned it. I've read Leelamrita before, the whole thing, going back to whenever it was published, which was quite some years ago. But now I'm reading it again, and it's, I'd say, at least 75% like I've never read it before. In fact, one day or one night after reading, I found an older version and checked, because I thought, what I just read, it wasn't in the Leelamrita before. It must have been updated, but it was in the Leelamrita before. So, this is really something. You develop a relationship, you develop appreciation for Prabhupada if you regularly read these things. And yeah, it's a really, really wonderful thing, not to be underestimated. And also, when we have Prabhupada evenings, we had a Prabhupada evening the day on the 31st of December. Yeah, just different pastimes of Srila Prabhupada, which, sort of the same thing as reading biographies, but, when you read pastimes, it's focused in particular ways on Prabhupada and particular characteristics and so on. So like these are two very good and important things for developing a relationship, appreciation and love for Srila Prabhupada. By serving him, and when you are serving, not just doing it on automatic pilot or just because it's just, it's your duty, you got to do it, but thinking while you're doing it, being conscious that I'm doing this for Prabhupada, or I'm doing it for Radha Radhanath, but under Prabhupada's supervision. This is Prabhupada consciousness, means being conscious of Prabhupada. We don't want to get into a state of Prabhupada unconsciousness, like Krishna unconsciousness. Okay, so now's number 6. Will you please explain what self-realization is? According to my understanding, it's someone who is enlightened. It is someone who's detached. It's someone who is pure. It is someone who is wise. And it is someone who is not controlled by emotions. This is what comes up when I hear this word self-realization. Could you confirm or explain what it means? Well, it's kind of, on one level, it's quite obvious. Self-realization means to realize yourself. At the moment, or just in general in material existence, people are not aware of who they are. They have not realized themselves. They think they are their bodies. I am a man. You are a woman. I am this age. You are that age. I have this sort of personality. You have that sort of personality. But that's ahankara, that's false ego, false identity, false self. Yes, so self-realization means to realize, and realize, of course, well, that's another important word, means the awareness goes beyond just being an idea or even a conviction. Realization means that it becomes experienced truth. Yeah, that you've actually experienced that it's true. It's not just a good idea or even an excellent idea. And Prabhupada gives an example of how a child may want to put his hand in fire. And of course, well, generally parents would try to stop the child. But if the child insists, Prabhupada explains, the father may say, okay, just touch the fire. And of course the child gets a little burnt. So then the child has the realization, you don't touch the fire. And it's through experience. Gyan and Vigyan. Gyan means basically book knowledge, and Vigyan means realized knowledge. Like, I'll give you the example of fire is one thing, but how about this? That chanting Hare Krishna is nice. So if you chant Hare Krishna attentively, you find out chanting Hare Krishna is nice. Am I right? It's really nice. It's just amazing, actually. It's just amazing. That's realization. It's not just that we read about it and therefore we say, yeah, well, they say it's nice. So that's the idea. That's self-realization. So who are we then? What are we going to realize when we realize who we are? We're going to realize that we're the eternal servants of Krishna in one type of relationship or another. That's self-realization. In particularly Nectar of Devotion, it's explained how there are 5 main types of relationships, eternal relationships with Krishna. A neutral relationship, sort of something like maybe the cows have, a servant relationship, a friendly relationship, a parental relationship, and ultimately a conjugal relationship with Krishna. So every one of us has an eternal relationship of one of those types. And it's already there. It's just it's become covered over and we've forgotten. So, but if we carry on practicing Krishna consciousness, gradually we'll come to see that, I am an eternal whatever it is, servant, friend. I have an eternal relationship with Krishna like that, and that's who I actually am. So Krishna consciousness is a gradual process of coming to that point. It's not that generally people quickly come to that point, but step by step, as the devotees practice, then all these things become more clear. I mean, all these things that, for example, that Krishna and his names are the same. Krishna and his names are the same. Like we said, we chant Hare Krishna, we find it's nice. But then why is it nice? It's nice because Krishna is present there. And we're contacting Krishna when we chant his names. So gradually that realization becomes more and more realized until finally you actually see Krishna in his names. So I hope that's clear enough. Is there a significance of chanting a minimum of 16 rounds a day? If there is, what's the significance? Well, certainly there's a significance. Again, Srila Prabhupada's such a transcendental expert, knowing how to get us to practice the process in such ways that it works to the greatest degree possible. I've been, not much at all, but I have been in some Gaudiya Math temples, just a couple of times actually, a few times overnight, like 3 or 4 times, many years ago. And we were overnight in one temple in Puri, and they have Mangalarti. Then after the Mangalarti, the devotees, nobody chants japa, not a soul chants japa. They all do different things. And I asked them, why do you not chant japa? And they said, during the day, what we do, we chant 4 rounds. But we fit it in sometime. So the emphasis was very clearly not on chanting the holy names. Now, I do realize that some of you during the japa time, or many or most, have services to do. But you really know, you got to chant 16 rounds. And ideally during the morning, I don't want to upset any member of the temple management who might be here. You know, like tell the devotees, you got to just chant in the morning program. If they ask you to do some service, just say, no, Prabhu, I am chanting my rounds. Prabhu. But anyway, the point of 16 rounds is that the principle is that in order to get through the day in Krishna consciousness, you need to chant a minimum number of rounds, or chant Hare Krishna a minimum number of times. Otherwise, if you chant less, then gradually during the day it may well happen, or it will happen, that it'll be more difficult for you to remember Krishna and just to be Krishna conscious. And so, yeah, it's sort of, the principle is something like, if you got to drive from here to Joburg, you need a certain minimum amount of petrol, otherwise you're not going to really make it. So it's something like that. If you chant less than 16 rounds, or, if you don't chant 16 rounds nicely as possible, then as the day goes on, your mind will become prone to wander. Yeah, so that's the idea. Number 8, sorry. Yeah, please.
Sometimes we find devotees, they prefer to do some service which they could do at another time in the day. They prefer to do it during japa. What would your comment be?
Yes. So the question is, some devotees during the day, when they could do japa, they prefer to do some service.
Like during the morning?
During the morning japa time. During the morning japa time, rather than chant japa, they'd rather do some service. Well, it depends, but it sounds, the thing is, we're conditioned souls, so to do things, we're more used to doing things than to sitting for a couple of hours and really focusing on meditation. So it may well be that it's sort of like the tendency towards not exactly workaholism, but just to the attraction to being active rather than settling into something contemplative or meditative. There's a famous story, I'm sure you're familiar, which was told to us by Giriraj Maharaj on a number of occasions. One boy, I think in Bombay, if I remember correctly, didn't want to chant japa at all. He liked cooking and being in the kitchen. So he told Prabhupada, I don't really want, he told him all services, all Krishna conscious activity is absolute, right? 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 Right. So therefore chanting and cooking, it's the same, right? Right? Am I right? So the devotee, not quite like that, but he told Prabhupada, so I like to cook. And I'm not into chanting, so I won't chant, I'll cook. And Prabhupada tried to convince him. I think it's in the Leela somewhere in one form or another. But anyway, Srila Prabhupada tried to convince him, but the boy could not be convinced. And he was insisting that all service is absolute. So if I don't like to chant, that's fine. I'll just do some other service. And it's as absolute as the chanting. So eventually Srila Prabhupada told him that you can eat and sleep all day if you like, but you must chant 16 rounds. Right. Yeah.
He said, I give you special prerogative.
Oh, I give you special prerogative, yeah, permission. Yeah, you can eat and sleep all day, but you must chant 16 rounds. So, it has a unique importance. And the best time's the morning, generally, because it's more in the mode of goodness. But at least there are 24 hours in a day. You must chant 16 rounds during the day. Okay, so number 8. What is a God brother? This is obviously someone who's fairly new to Krishna consciousness. Well, in very simple terms, it's a devotee who is initiated by the same spiritual master as you. That devotee is your God brother or God sister. In Sanskrit, I'd say, Guru Bhai, they use that term. Bhai meaning brother and Guru. Your brothers under the same Guru. In English, we use the term God brother. Yeah. So that's what a God brother is. Number 9, how to get initiation. Now that's an important question. Of course, we've been asked really many times, but it remains an important question. How to get initiation? Well, first of all, you got to take up the process seriously and really want to become a devotee and focus your life in Krishna consciousness. So it has to be based on the understanding that Krishna consciousness is the most valuable thing. Yeah. So how to get initiation? You got to take the process up seriously. Means you got to follow the regulative principles, chant not less than 16 rounds. You should associate with devotees, take only prasadam, food offered to Krishna, do service regularly, study the literatures. These are all elements in the picture. And then, of course, you've got to get initiation, you also have to choose a spiritual master. And there are quite a few, I'm not sure, 80 or 90, it might be 90 or something, devotees in ISKCON who are giving initiation. And each one's an individual, so different personalities are there to whatever degrees. So, in other words, you normally don't just close your eyes and, did you ever at a children's party pin the tail on the donkey or the something? Did you ever do that? You close your eyes and you got a safety pin with a little tail on it, and you got to pin it on the donkey in the right place and not in the head, or not in outer space. So you don't just close your eyes and just, I'll take this one. Now you got to see who is helping you in Krishna consciousness. Ultimately, it boils down to that. Who's inspiring you, helping you in your Krishna consciousness, because it's a practical relationship for your personal development. So that's, the most essential things you could say are following the regulative principles and chanting 16 rounds. And other things are also, you got to read the books, but those two when you finally get initiated, you will be asked to vow to do those things. You will not really be asked to vow, like formally in front of everyone, to do or not do anything else in Krishna consciousness. Okay, normally we take remnants of senior devotees and it is believed that the senior devotee takes karma from the one who takes his remnants. If a senior devotee takes remnants of a junior devotee, in this case, what happens? Well, it's not just a belief, but it's definitely an understanding that when one takes the remnants of senior devotees, the senior devotee does take some karma, not like he takes all your karma, but does take some karma through your taking his or perhaps her remnants. And therefore, in many cases, for the disciples of a spiritual master, they will be the ones who take the remnants of their spiritual master, and others who are either not initiated or disciples of other spiritual masters. In many cases, the remnants of that particular spiritual master will not just be distributed widely, but just within the circle of the disciples. In many cases, it's not always like that, but in many cases, because the spiritual master has agreed to accept the disciples and to help them in whatever way, which can include letting them take the remnants. But a senior devotee is not going to take the remnants of a junior devotee, unless it's a mistake or something strange happens and the senior devotee doesn't know that it's the remnants of a junior devotee. But anyway, if it happens, then it may well be that the junior devotee might possibly have to take some of the karma. But, this is very theoretical. I don't know of senior devotees just under any circumstances taking the remnants of junior devotees. Do you? I can't think of it. Because, it's quite a subject, the remnants of particularly the spiritual masters. But junior devotee, you know what the solution to the possible problem would be? Don't take too much prasadam on your plate. And whatever you put on your plate, you eat it all. Then you'll never have to worry about that. Sometimes there's sort of a saying or something. His eyes are bigger than his stomach. Devotees just, they're walking through the line. Oh, that looks good. Yeah, I'll take a bit more. Oh, that looks good too. And before you know, you end up with this mountain of prasadam. And I don't know what's worse. Well, anyway, there are all sorts of not good things which can come from that. One is throwing away prasadam. That's not good. Another is taking it to your room and leaving it there, often to just go moldy and, end up being thrown out anyway, but otherwise attracting the local friendly cockroaches. Yeah. And you might say, well, we're trying to make them into devotees. The cockroach junior devotee takes your remnants. So best, even Srila Prabhupada, if devotees served him a lot, then it sort of put him off. He preferred to be served small amounts, and then some could be added by the servant. Yeah. Number 11. What is the right consciousness to serve the Vaishnavas, and how to develop that consciousness? Well, the right consciousness to serve the Vaishnavas, it's not exactly the right question. You got to have a mood, a consciousness that you want to serve the Vaishnavas. You could say that you should have the consciousness of appreciating how nice these Vaishnavas are, and therefore I want to serve them because they deserve it. Yeah, and me being a lowly person, I should definitely serve them because they're better than me. So that's, a nice consciousness. And how do you develop that consciousness? Well, I would say you just got to train your mind a bit, start thinking like this. Sometimes I've advised devotees, try to memorize the 26 qualities of a devotee. And then when you're observing the devotees during the day, and it's particularly relevant for devotees living in a temple, try to see them, observe them, how they possess those qualities. All, or at least some of them. So if you try to appreciate devotees in those terms, then you'll get inspiration to serve them. What is second initiation? Why is it important to take second initiation? Well, second initiation is given to devotees who already have first initiation. Yes. There are occasions when first and second have been given to devotees at the same time. It happened with Srila Prabhupada. But it's very rare. It's very rare. So second initiation means now the devotee has made progress from the first initiation stage. And second initiation is also referred to as Brahminical initiation. So the devotee has made progress from first initiation, which would include developing some or all of the qualities of a Brahmin, because it's Brahminical initiation. Generally people who are devotees, who are, with all due respect, kind of dirty or, kind of maybe uncouth or something like that, then second initiation may not be for them. It's possible. It's more for devotees who really, you can see there's progress and there's development of the culture of the devotee. So then, when it's seen that devotees are developing, making progress, including developing Brahminical qualities, then they may get second initiation. And it's important because when you get second initiation, you get two things. You get Gayatri mantras, which are very important and very helpful mantras. Yeah, they'll help you progress. They're not superior to Hare Krishna, but they sort of help with chanting Hare Krishna. And then you get built into the second initiation is automatic permission. You can worship installed deities, not just home deities, You get so many devotees at home who even sometimes are not initiated at all, but somehow they've ended up with deities and doing some worship, or at least first initiated. But really, one should be second initiated to worship the deity. Then, okay, now number 13, we're getting there, devotees. Another 5-10 minutes. Since I'm trying to be on the path of devotion, I follow the 4 regulative principles. But the money I earn, my wife and children are not vegetarian. Will I get karma for it? Well, you probably will. There are many families like that. There's only one devotee out of 3 or 4 or 5 people in the family. And the devotee's the only one who's vegetarian. So, if you're earning, well, you say you're earning, then you should really try. Of course, you should try to get them to become devotees, but if they won't, at least try to get them to become vegetarian. But if they won't, then ideally, you should try somehow or other to work something out so the money you earn doesn't have to go to their meat or fish or eggs or onions or garlic or tea or coffee or their cigarettes, like that. And there are many, I know many devotees who are in such situations, and it's a struggle, but in many cases, it's often the husband, but it's sometimes the wife. After some time, they agree, all right, I'll cook my own meat. Yeah. So that's the best thing. And will you get karma? Krishna is very kind to his devotees, and you have a duty to maintain your family. So it won't be as bad as if you're just buying meat for yourself. But there will be something. It's very likely there'll be something, some price to pay. Right. Who is Radharani? That's a good question. Well, tune in September for Radhastami and find out. But Srimati Radharani is the pleasure potency of Krishna. Krishna's complete capacity to enjoy. In other words, she is part of him. She's actually part of him. Yeah. And therefore, and Krishna's enjoyment, Krishna's pleasure, comes from being served. So she is the embodiment of service to Krishna. She's Bhakti Devi, the presiding deity of devotional service. And all of us, as we're trying to do our humble efforts in devotional service, we should all regularly pray to Srimati Radharani that you are the mother of devotion, the queen of devotion, and I'm trying to serve your beloved Lord Krishna. Please help me. I have been chanting the Maha Mantra all the time for a month now, but I'm seeing no significant effects. Why is it so? Well, I'm a little surprised to hear that. I would expect that, at least, in my experience, so many devotees who I know, and I've asked them how, their chanting's going, but many of them, they feel at least some effect, some beneficial effect. Generally speaking, if someone chants but they don't feel significant effect, generally speaking, it's because they're committing offenses. They're not chanting properly, you could say, not chanting attentively, or they're committing any or some of the 10 offenses. Yeah, because doing like that will definitely reduce the effect, or even possibly cancel out the effect of chanting Hare Krishna. Therefore, it's very important, it's vital to chant very attentively as much as you're capable, and avoid the other offenses as much as you're capable, and pray to the Lord to make up for shortcomings in your sincere efforts. So here is the last one. How can devotees living in Grihastha ashram detach their minds from their partner and children and attach it to Krishna? It sounds difficult. Well, I must say that I have not been in the Grihastha ashram in this lifetime. So, in a sense, I don't have first-hand experience. But if you talk about being in the Grihastha ashram, then that would necessarily really mean, or ideally at least, that you are married to another devotee. And so when you associate together, it's not just man and woman, just like that, but it's devotee and devotee. And of course they have their material bodies, which, not going to be totally just overlooked unless they're extremely advanced. But basically, the relationship is one of sharing together in Krishna consciousness, helping each other in Krishna consciousness, encouraging each other, inspiring each other. If one has some difficulty, then helping the wife, or helping the husband if the husband has some difficulty, like this. And the children, training them to become devotees. If that's done nicely, then it's not difficult to train children to become devotees, because children are just very simple little people. So if it's really done nicely, then children can become devotees. And so then the family is really, it's really a Krishna conscious situation. It's an ashram. It's not just a man with a woman, with children. It's not just like that. So of course some challenges are there, because the male body is there, the female body, the children's bodies particularly children need a lot of attention with their physical conditions and so on. But still, if the determination is there at heart to be Krishna conscious, and to be Krishna conscious together as a team, then it can be very nice. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. That's all. Any other comment or question from anyone, or shall we? Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Oh, okay.